vierte.
هادئة جدا.
Good afternoon on this Monday, May 16th. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. The second round of municipal elections in Mount Lebanon ends peacefully with 56% with voter turnout. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry meets with Libyan Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj in Vienna ahead of talks on a political transition in Libya. And several people are killed in Yemen as a suicide bomber blows himself up at a security headquarters in the southern city of Mukalla. The second round of municipal elections in Mount Lebanon ended peacefully with 56% voter turnout, but was marked by fierce battles fought in key Christian towns by allied parties backing rival lists for the control of local councils. In Sin el-Fil, a candidate list headed by the current mayor Nabil Kahale swept all the town's member municipal council according to initial results. Kahale's list is backed by the Kataeb Party, MP Michel Mour, and local families against a rival ticket supported by the FPM and the Lebanese forces. Preliminary results suggest that candidate lists backed by Mour and other allies have achieved victory in the Mitten district's municipal councils and a dozen of villages. In the southern Beirut suburb of Hadas, a candidate list headed by the current mayor George Houn and backed by the FPM has won all seats of the town's local council. A hotly contested battle was also fought in the southern Beirut suburb of Gbeiri, where Hezbollah enjoys wide support. Candidates backed by the Free Patriotic Movement have won 14 of 18 seats that were up for grabs in Junia's local elections. The national news agency reported that the Junia's Dignity list, headed by Joan Habeish and supported by the FPM, the Kataeb Party and some local families, has won 14 seats in Junia's council according to unofficial results. The remaining 4 seats went to Silvio Shiha, Fadi Fayyad, Rodriguez Finianos and Fuad Boueri of the Junia's renewal list, which is backed by the Lebanese forces, several local families, as well as former MPs Mansour El-Bon and Farid Haikal El-Khazin. The third round of municipal polls is scheduled for Sunday in South Lebanon and Nabatiyeh, and on the 29th in North Lebanon and Akkar. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has met with Libyan Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj in Vienna ahead of talks on a political transition in Libya and providing support for the country's new unity government. The meeting will focus on international efforts to bring stability to Libya, where two rival governments have fought for power since the way for the Islamic State to establish itself and gain ground in the North African state. Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj's UN-backed government of national accord arrived in Tripoli a month ago, but it has faced resistance from hardliners in both the Libyan factions running rival governments. And coming up next, actresses Susan Sarandon and Gina Davies are honored at Cannes' Women in Motion dinner. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A suicide bomber blew himself up at a security headquarters in the southern Yemeni city of Mukalla, killing and wounding several people a day after an ISIS suicide bombing killed 25 police recruits there. Over a year of devastating civil war in Yemen has given Al-Qaeda and ISIS militants unprecedented freedom to operate, and both groups have carried out a spate of bombing and shooting attacks on Yemeni and Gulf Arab forces in the country. Palestinian Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah has expressed support for a French initiative for an international conference to try to revive Middle East peace talks. France has called for an international gathering of ministers tentatively planned in Paris for May the 30th to set out a framework for Middle East peace negotiations after U.S. efforts to broker a two-state deal collapsed in April of 2014.
You know, as I said before, we have been talking with the Israelis for 22 years actually, and nothing has been achieved. Nothing has been achieved. So now really we wanted this international peace conference in which all countries can participate. So we hope that the peace conference, which I hope will be held in the summer, I hope can set new parameters for peaceful settlement between us and Israel, in which all countries can participate. At least the major countries can participate in this conference. And maybe we can set a time limit for the withdrawal of the Israeli troops, and a time limit for the establishment of Palestinian sovereign independent state over the 67 borders with East Jerusalem as our capital.
A comparison made by Boris Johnson, the former London mayor, that the European Union is pursuing similar goals to Hitler in trying to create a powerful superstate has drawn sharp criticism from fellow politicians and the public of the in-camp. Johnson, a Conservative MP, is leading campaigner for Britain to leave the 23rd EU, the 23rd at a June referendum. In an interview published in the Saturday Telegraph, he said a unifying authority was doomed to fail. While fellow pro-Brexit Conservative colleagues supported Johnson's comments, he drew criticism from the in-camp. Hilary Benn, Foreign Affairs spokesman for the opposition Labour Party, said Johnson had lost his moral compass. And still on the topic, Finance Minister George Osborne attacked pro-Brexit campaigners for saying Britain should not just leave the European Union, but also its single market, as he sought to convince voters that the economy faces big risks in the next month's referendum. Osborne said Britain would lose £200 billion in trade in 15 years' time and miss out on the same amount in foreign investment if it fell back on World Trade Organization rules to govern its ties with the EU after a Brexit.
Michael, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, it's really good to be here. The interventions of the last couple of weeks, from the IMF to the Bank of England, make very clear that the economic argument is beyond doubt. Britain will be worse off if we leave the EU. British families will be worse off, equivalent to £4,300 per household. Leaving the EU is a one-way ticket to a poorer Britain. The overwhelming opinion you get at the moment. And what has been the response of the Leave campaign? They say it is all a massive conspiracy. So that's everyone from Mark Carney to Christine Lagarde to Barack Obama to the entire editorial team at ITV to the staff at the IMF and the OECD to hundreds of economists to a majority of leaders of small, medium and large firms. They think they're all part of some global stitch-up to give misinformation to the British people. The next thing we know, the Leave camp will be accusing us of faking the moon landings, kidnapping Sherga and covering up the existence of the Loch Ness Monster. The response to the sober economic warnings from around the world by those who want to leave the EU has not been credible or serious.
Voting to leave the EU now really is a one-way ticket to a poorer Britain, not just in the short term, but for decades to come. And for the Remain campaign, for the Leave campaign to go round the country trying to pretend the opposite is frankly reckless, misleading and deeply irresponsible.
Researchers in Switzerland have created a prototype robot car that is capable of transitioning from the ground to the wall, appearing to defy gravity in the process. It can drive smoothly on a vertical surface, maintaining its hold even when perpendicular to the ground. Find out more about Vertigo in this report.
This robot appears to defy gravity. The prototype car, called Vertigo, is capable of transitioning from the ground to the wall, appearing to break the usual rules of science in the process.
It does this by using the front propellers mainly, and they can turn around in 360 degrees. And so if the robot drives up to a wall, it hits the wall with the front wheels, and the front propeller turns around 180 degrees, and then the front propeller pushes it from the ground and it starts climbing up the wall.
The robot has two tiltable propellers that provide thrust onto the wall and four wheels. Vertigo is driven by a user like a remote-controlled car, but adjusts its propellers automatically in response to changes in the surrounding surfaces. Weight is kept to a minimum by using a central carbon fibre base plate and a range of other materials.
Since this robot is defying gravity, all the parts need to be as lightweight as possible. Because of this, we used carbon fibre plates with honeycomb cores for all the main structure, and for the wheels and connecting parts we used 3D printed parts. And also all the screws, or pretty much all the screws, are plastic screws.
The thrust from the robot's propellers can also help it drive over rough materials like masonry. It's one time when being driven up the wall is exactly what was intended.
Thelma and Louise film stars Susan Sarandon and Gina Davies reunited in Cannes on Sunday for a special event supporting women in the film industry. Both actresses were attending a Women in Motion dinner where they were honored for their outstanding contribution to the film industry and women's causes. Also at the A-list event in Cannes were actresses Frida Pinto and Isabel Huppert, along with actors and jury members Kirsten Dunst and Mads Mikkelsen. Actresses Salma Hayek, who spoke at the same event last year, said some progress had been made.
I know when we were making Thelma and Louise that we didn't understand how threatening it would be. I don't know if you remember what a backlash there was. Now it's a feminist film, but at the time people said that we were condoning suicide and, you know, all kind of hate, man-hating, and, you know, and compared to what happens to women in film, of course, at that time it was ridiculous. And Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, nobody suggested that was condoning suicide. So there was a double standard, and I think now the fact that we accept it as a feminist film or as a buddy film or something shows that we have made some progress. I think we should focus on having really happy lives while we're making these films and not get too discouraged by pay inequity, or because it again is a subjective business. It's not like, you know, two firefighters, one's a man and one's a woman, they're doing the same job and they should get paid the same amount. I mean, which is true. But when you're in this business, I mean, you know, people get paid outrageous amount of monies that you don't think are particularly great, and then there's other actors that keeps, you know, in so many films, character actors, for instance, who've been in films for 40 years and they're still not getting paid, but they should be getting paid. So it's always been, there's never been anything about it that's been particularly just.
Not while we made it, no. It wasn't until after it came out. We had no clue that it was going to get the reaction that it did. It was very startling and stunning and kind of great. You know, I mean, when people recognized me before that movie, it was completely different than when they recognized me after that, because it meant something to them, you know, and they wanted to tell me all about how they felt about it. But then in the press, we were also unprepared for some of the negative outrage that happened. You know, oh, the world is ruined now. Women have guns. This is a terrible thing. So it was very interesting. It's really something special to be in a film that strikes a nerve like that.
I think it's about time. Well, not about time. It's too slow. It's taking too long. But I am proud to have the opportunity to talk again tomorrow, and I see a huge change just in the industry from last year to this year, and I really believe that the talks have made a difference and have changed, because a lot of people refer to it, and after many of the talks, many publications started repeating some of the themes that were addressed during the talks. So I am proud of the Cannes Film Festival and also of Kerry for, you know, being the engine that it's continuing to push this movement.
So it's fantastic. It's I've never been in a jury before, but it's by far the best jury I've been in. It's lovely. People are fantastic and funny and charming, and we're on hard labor here. It's a lot of work, and we're trying to do our very best.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. The second round of municipal elections in Mount Lebanon ends peacefully with 56% voter turnout. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry meets with Libyan Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj in Vienna ahead of talks on a political transition in Libya. And several people are killed in Yemen as a suicide bomber blows himself up at his security headquarters in the southern city of Mukalla. Those are your top stories for this Monday. I'm Linda Tamim signing off.
هادئة جدا.